Good morning. Everything surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers changed the moment Aaron Rodgers finally stepped in front of the media and explained why he decided to come back for the 2026 season, because for the first time this offseason, fans finally got a direct answer from the quarterback himself. And what stood out immediately was how calculated this entire process really was behind the scenes in Pittsburgh. Rodgers made it very clear that this wasn't some rushed decision, and it wasn't something he handled emotionally. According to him, the reason he took so long to commit to the Steelers was simple. He wanted complete freedom to decide whether he still had the physical and mental desire to keep playing football. Since he was not under contract, he believed he had earned the right to take all the time necessary before making the final call. But the most important detail here is that he also said he stayed honest with Mike McCarthy, Omar Khan, and Art Rooney throughout the entire process. That tells you the Steelers organization knew where Rodgers stood for months, even while the outside world kept speculating about retirement. What makes this story even bigger for Steelers fans is the fact that Rodgers openly admitted the hiring of Mike McCarthy completely changed his mindset about returning to Pittsburgh. That might be the biggest revelation from this entire press conference. Rodgers explained that after Mike Tomlin stepped away, he honestly believed his time with the Steelers was over. He described Tomlin's departure as emotional because of how respected and loved he was inside the building. But once Pittsburgh made the decision to hire Mike McCarthy, Rodgers suddenly became interested again in playing another season. And when you really think about it, this explains so much about the Steelers' offseason strategy. Rodgers revealed that he actually encouraged Omar Khan to interview Mike McCarthy during previous conversations. That means the connection between Rodgers and McCarthy was not something that happened randomly after the coaching search. This relationship was already part of the discussion long before the hiring became official. Rodgers clearly trusts McCarthy, and the Steelers knew exactly what bringing him in could mean for the quarterback situation moving forward. Now, that does not mean Rodgers alone decided who became head coach in Pittsburgh, but it absolutely sounds like the organization understood that hiring McCarthy dramatically increased their chances of bringing Rodgers back for one more season. And considering how quickly Rodgers recommitted once McCarthy arrived, it is hard to ignore how connected those two decisions really were. The other thing that should excite Steelers fans is that Rodgers does not sound like someone returning just for nostalgia or one final paycheck. He repeatedly talked about how closely he followed the moves Pittsburgh made during the offseason. He watched the roster construction, he paid attention to the draft, and he specifically mentioned how much he liked the offensive direction the team took. That matters because Rodgers basically admitted he evaluated whether this roster was truly capable of competing before deciding to return. He liked the offensive-focused draft approach. He liked the additions around him. He mentioned the chemistry potential between DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr., but especially talking about Pittman's catch radius and how it complements the offense. And according to Rodgers himself, after the NFL draft ended, that was the moment he fully realized he wanted to come back to Pittsburgh. That tells you Rodgers believes this team is close. Not rebuilding, not resetting, close. He even said the Steelers were close last season, and that the improvements made offensively this offseason convinced him they can seriously compete for a Super Bowl in 2026. That is a massive statement coming from a quarterback entering year 22 of his career. Rodgers would not return if he thought this roster had no chance. He came back because he believes Pittsburgh can legitimately contend. Another detail that caught attention was Rodgers confirming he already moved back into his Pittsburgh home with his wife in early May before officially reporting for OTAs. That shows this decision had quietly been made for a while behind the scenes, even if the public had not heard the final announcement yet. But maybe the most fascinating part of the entire press conference was how Rodgers talked about the younger quarterbacks in the room, specifically Will Howard and Drew Aller. Rodgers joked that mentoring younger quarterbacks technically is not part of his job description, but then immediately admitted it is something he genuinely enjoys doing. He specifically said he will mentor Drew Aller as much as Aller wants, while continuing to help develop Will Howard as well. That is a major detail because it gives fans a glimpse into how Pittsburgh may be preparing for the future after Rodgers retires. The Steelers clearly believe Rodgers can do more than just win games in 2026. They believe he can help prepare the next era of Steelers football. And when you look at the situation carefully, it really feels like Pittsburgh is setting up a long-term quarterback transition behind the scenes. If the organization truly wanted to immediately find out whether Howard or Aller were ready right now, they would would not have brought Rodgers back. Instead, they are allowing those young quarterbacks to spend another year learning behind one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. That says everything about the Steelers' plan. The organization appears willing to let Rodgers lead the present while simultaneously developing the future. And based on the investment Pittsburgh made in Drew Aller, there is already growing belief internally that he could eventually become the favorite to lead this franchise after Rodgers steps away. Then came the biggest moment of the press conference. Aaron Rodgers officially confirmed that this will be the final season of his NFL career. After 22 seasons, 4 MVP awards, a Super Bowl championship, and a Hall of Fame career, Rodgers says this is the ending. Ironically, it started with Mike McCarthy years ago, and now it may finish with Mike McCarthy in Pittsburgh. That alone makes this season feel historic before a single game has even been played. Of course, Rodgers has hinted at retirement before, so nobody can completely rule out another surprise return someday. But this time, he sounded much more certain. And if this truly is the end, then the Steelers are about to experience one of the most important and emotional seasons this franchise has had in years, because now the pressure is enormous. The Steelers are not just trying to compete, they are trying to maximize the final season of Aaron Rodgers' legendary career while also preparing the next generation of quarterbacks at the same time. And honestly, Steelers fans, that creates one huge question moving forward. If Rodgers truly believes this team is close to a Super Bowl, do you think Pittsburgh finally has enough talent around him to make a real championship run in 2026? The reality inside Pittsburgh right now is that this season is no longer just about winning football games. It feels like the Steelers are trying to balance two completely different missions at the same time, and Aaron Rodgers confirmed that with almost every answer he gave during this press conference. On one side, the organization believes it has a real opportunity to compete immediately with a veteran quarterback who still thinks he can lead a championship run. On the other side, they are quietly building the future behind him with young quarterbacks they clearly do not want to rush too early. And when you connect all the details Rodgers revealed, you start understanding why the Steelers handled this offseason the way they did. Rodgers openly admitted he studied everything Pittsburgh was doing before committing to another season. He paid attention to free agency, trades, the draft, coaching changes, and roster construction. That means he was evaluating whether this franchise was actually serious about competing right now or simply trying to survive another year. The fact he ultimately decided to come back tells you he liked what he saw. But what may surprise fans most is how strongly Rodgers spoke about the offensive improvements around him. He did not sound like a quarterback preparing for a farewell tour. He sounded like someone who genuinely believes this offense can become dangerous. The mention of DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. stood out immediately because Rodgers specifically highlighted how those skill sets can work together. He talked about Pittman's catch radius and how it complements the offense, and that gives fans a glimpse into how Rodgers already sees this passing attack developing inside Mike McCarthy's system. You can tell he has already visualized how this offense is supposed to function, and honestly, that should excite Steelers fans because one of the biggest problems surrounding Pittsburgh in recent years has been offensive inconsistency. Too often, the offense looked predictable, limited, or unable to create explosive plays in big moments. Rodgers clearly believes the Steelers fixed some of those issues this offseason. That also explains why Mike McCarthy's arrival mattered so much. Rodgers trusts him completely. There is already familiarity there, already chemistry, already understanding. Rodgers knows the offense McCarthy wants to run, and McCarthy knows how to structure an offense around Rodgers' strengths. That removes a huge adjustment period that normally exists when a quarterback joins a new system. Instead of spending months trying to build trust, both men already understand each other. That could become one of the Steelers' biggest advantages entering the season. But the deeper storyline here may actually involve the quarterback room behind Rodgers, because the Steelers are not treating Will Howard and Drew Aller like backups with no future. Everything about Rodgers' comments suggested the organization sees real long-term potential in both players, especially Drew Aller. Rodgers talked about mentoring them willingly, helping them grow, and leaving an impact on the future of the franchise. That is not random language. That sounds like a quarterback who understands he is part of a transition plan. And honestly, this may be the perfect situation for Pittsburgh. Instead of throwing a young quarterback into pressure immediately, the Steelers are giving their prospects time to develop behind one of the smartest quarterbacks in NFL history. Rodgers has seen every defensive coverage imaginable. He understands preparation, timing, leadership, adjustments, and situational football at an elite level. Even one season around that environment could accelerate the development of Howard and Aller dramatically. The interesting part is that Rodgers almost made it sound like the Steelers already know what the future could look like after him. him, he repeatedly talked about helping prepare the next generation, and while nothing is guaranteed yet, the organization clearly believes Drew Aller especially has the physical tools to eventually become a franchise quarterback. Rodgers even seemed comfortable embracing that mentor role instead of resisting it. That matters because not every veteran quarterback wants to help develop the player who could eventually replace him. Rodgers appears different right now. Maybe it is because he knows this is likely the final chapter of his career. Maybe it is because he respects the direction Pittsburgh is heading. Or maybe he simply wants to leave behind more than statistics and wins before he retires. Whatever the reason, the Steelers now have a quarterback room built around both present success and future development. Still, none of that changes the pressure surrounding this season, because once Rodgers publicly confirmed this is expected to be his final NFL season, the expectations immediately became bigger. Every game now carries more weight. Every playoff conversation becomes more intense. Every moment could become part of the final memories of a Hall of Fame career. And make no mistake, Pittsburgh understands the opportunity sitting in front of them. You do not bring back Aaron Rodgers, hire Mike McCarthy, improve the offense, and spend this much energy building around one season unless you believe you can compete deep into January. The Steelers are pushing forward, believing they can contend with the AFC's best teams right now. The biggest challenge, however, is that the AFC remains absolutely brutal. Teams like the Chiefs, Bills, Bengals, Ravens, and Texans are all loaded with talent and elite quarterbacks. The Steelers are entering a conference where almost every playoff game feels like a heavyweight fight. That means Rodgers not only has to stay healthy, but he also has to play at a level much closer to his MVP form than what fans saw during difficult stretches last season, and that is where this entire story becomes fascinating. Because Rodgers himself sounds convinced he can still do it. He sounds motivated. He sounds refreshed. He sounds energized by the roster moves Pittsburgh made. And maybe most importantly, he sounds emotionally invested in this team already. You can hear it in the way he talks about the Steelers organization, the coaching staff, and the younger quarterbacks around him. This does not feel like a temporary stop for him anymore. It feels like a final mission. Now the question becomes whether the Steelers can turn all this belief into